Hey everybody, welcome to day 13 of our Kratom Addiction and Recovery Daily Devotional series. So this week we're in Ecclesiastes and we're in chapter 3, verse 1 through 11. And yesterday and the day before we were in verses 1, 2, and 3. And today we're in verse 4. And that is a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. Wow, I love this. I could really ponder on this one for a long time. We're talking about seasons this week. We're talking about the seasons of our lives, and we're talking about the seasons of our addiction and recovery process. And I've shared it quite a few times that I ended up on kratom partly because of grief that I was navigating at the time. I had lost two close family members, very close together, and I had lost, actually as well, I've never mentioned this before, I had lost two other family members as well that weren't as close to me, but they were still losses nonetheless. And this verse says, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. Man, that's so beautiful. A time to weep and a time to laugh. You know, it's not natural for us to be happy all the time. It's not natural for us to be laughing and joyful all the time. Weeping and sadness is a part of life. And to me, it makes the joy so much sweeter. So there is a time to weep, and kratom, when we're in our kratom addiction, it hijacks our neurochemistry of our brains, and in that are our neurochemicals that are responsible for regulating our emotions. So at first especially, there is a lot of fake happiness and euphoria from the kratom. I've shared this with you when we do our one-on-ones, that the joy, I have a hard time even calling it joy. I don't really even consider it joy. The euphoria and the happiness that kratom gives us is fake. And it is making our brains create dopamine, which is the neurochemical that is responsible for feelings of happiness and contentment and peace and satisfaction. And when we take kratom, it makes our brains create a lot of that neurochemical. So for a while during the time when we first start taking kratom, we feel great. And whenever we take kratom, we feel great. As we start getting into our addiction, though, and as our doses increase and our tolerance increases, and our bodies start to really feel the effects and the damage from kratom, things change, and there will be a lot of other not so great emotions in there. And for a lot of us, we have feelings of rage. We have feelings of really, really dark lows when our doses wear off. And so there is a lot more than just the pure joy of the beginning of our addictions, or maybe our addictions hadn't even started yet, the beginning of when we started taking kratom. So it's the joy, the happiness, I'm not going to call it joy, the happiness is fleeting, but it's still happiness nonetheless. And so there is a time for weeping, as this verse says. This fake happiness that we then have to pay back for later, and the deep lows that we get after the doses wear off, and the rage that some of us get, that is the payback, and the addiction is the payback for this happiness. So when we think about this, there's a time to weep and a time to laugh. It's natural in life to have times of sadness. It's natural in life to have times of joy. And so kratom really takes that natural happiness and that natural sadness away from us. The next part is a time to mourn and a time to dance. I shared about my losses with you because for me, the time to mourn, I interrupted with my kratom use. I was really sad. I was not ready to grieve. Grieving is a really gnarly, non-linear process. I talk about how recovery is a non-linear process, but also grief is. It's oftentimes uncharted territory that none of us have been in before, that we have no control over. And it ebbs and flows like the tides, and there are waves to it. There are waves of emotions that come over us when we lose someone that we love very much. And I heard this beautiful saying, I might mess it up, that grief is love without a home. I think that's what it says, and I'm going to go with it for now because that really resonates. It's love without a home. You know, when we love somebody so much that we lose, our love for them doesn't have a home because they're not here anymore. And for those of us that are believers, we can find peace and solace in the fact that some of our loved ones are, you know, in a better place now. But for some of us that don't have those beliefs, it can be really hard. And for even those of us that do, you know, even if you know, even though I do believe that those that I've lost are in better places, it still hurts when the people that we know are no longer with us. And a lot of times there are a lot of questions surrounding the loss that we have. And so that imposes its own challenges too, where it's not a cut and dry, perfect goodbye for a lot of us. Sometimes it was left open-ended. So there's a lot of difficulties when it comes to grieving. But as this verse says, there is a time to mourn. And if we don't go through this, if we don't go through this uncharted territory and this process and this unfolding of navigating grief, what can happen is we can get stuck. And I've seen people personally who this has happened to, where they I knew actually an alcoholic who started drinking. He had lost his father when he was in his teens. I think he was like 16 or something. And he started partying and he started drinking really hard when he had that loss. Excuse me. And he drank all throughout his life, and he's now in his 50s. And he's been an active alcoholic the whole time. And he's kind of stayed in this like time capsule of who he was at that time that he had that loss, and then when his addiction started. So that's what can happen to us. We can stay stuck in not only that loss, but not being able to move through the grief. And grief is extremely painful, but it is a huge teacher in our lives. Grief teaches us so many things. It teaches us about ourselves. It teaches us about our love for that person. It teaches us how to go through these really messy emotions that you don't really see on the forefront of everyday life and people. It's, you know, that kind of stuff is really swept under the rug in our culture and on TV and in social media. You don't see grieving. When you do see it, it makes people feel uncomfortable a lot of times. So we don't really see it a lot. And it really teaches you how to go through it and how to accept it in yourself. Because the only way out of this is going through it. The only way out of this is experiencing those waves of emotions that sometimes you can't even articulate what kind of emotions that they are. So, you know, going through that is what teaches us. And then as time goes on, we're able to come to this place. Does the pain ever go away? For me, it hasn't. For these two big losses, it's been going on 10 years. And I've said it before, I'll say it now. It was the loss of my father was one of them. When we lose a parent or a child, anybody really in our lineage, in our genetics, that came before or after us, when we're losing someone that close, their genetics are a part of us. Or with our child, our genetics are a part of them. So it's like literally, I've explained it as like the cells of my body mourn the loss of my father, because my father is a part of me. I have half of his genetics within me. So it's like the marrow of my bones, my actual DNA itself knows that he is gone. And does the pain ever go away? No, it didn't for me. It doesn't for me, but it's changed. And the pain has changed me. And so over these years, and especially after quitting kratom, because it'll be 3 years that I've quit in about a month and a half, and I've really gone through the messy part of this grieving process after quitting kratom. The kratom, and also I was addicted to weed for 15 years too. That was also kind of halting the really deep parts of the grieving process. When I gave those things up was when I really started to get into the work of the grieving. And it was not easy, everybody. It was not easy. But when I've gotten into, especially this past year, I've seen the fruits of that labor. I've seen how it's deepened my capacity for empathy for others. I've seen how it has really made me proud about carrying on my father's legacy of his love of food, and his love of music, and his humility, and his hard-working nature. And I'm proud to carry on that legacy. And I mean pride in a healthy way, not pride in an unhealthy way. So I've been able to do that. I've been able to, my father is a part of me, like I've said, comfort his wife, who is my stepmom, that I love so dearly, and to really be there for her. And I feel that sense of responsibility for that, since my dad loved her so much, that I'm able to carry on his legacy in the sense of, my relationship with her. So there are many things that I've been able to gain from this, going through this process of grieving. And yes, it's been hard, but the things that I've learned from it and how I've become such a better person from it has been great. And there's been the season of this in my life. And then, it leads on to where this verse leads on to where I'm getting to now, that there is a time to mourn, but there's also a time to dance. Wow, I got covered in chills even saying that, because now it's my time to dance. And there will be your time to dance too. In our addiction and recovery process, there's a grieving that goes on there as well. It doesn't have to be just from losing a person. Kratom, for a lot of us, for me, personally, but for a lot of us, kratom kind of becomes like our best friend. It becomes our, something that we're in a relationship. It becomes the thing that's there for us when we need it. It becomes, no matter how hard things are, we know that we can just, mix up this thing of sludge, and that we'll be able to drink it and feel better. And so, we create a relationship with it. And for me, I had to mourn that. I put a lot of hope and faith into kratom for a long time. And it was there for me a lot of times when I needed it. So I had to grieve that, letting go of that thing that helped me for so long. I thought that helped me, but it was really hurting me. So there was that time of grieving in that sense and mourning in that sense. But there comes a time to dance. And in my recovery process, this past year especially has been so full of simple joys and happiness and accomplishments and seeing the fruit of my labor. And I'm so grateful for it. And, I come from a hippie background where we would dance at these concerts to the Grateful Dead music and to Fish's music. And so I grew up dancing. And I'm part Cuban too, and I'm a musician, so I've always, danced to music. And though I may not live that life anymore, I still, there are times where I'm just in my living room by myself listening to music, and I just will dance before the Lord. It talks about how David danced before the Lord. And so I got covered in chills because I was reflecting on, there's been times where I have just, while in worship, just broken out into song and singing and praise and dance before the Lord, just like David did. And so I've had my time to dance, and it's not over yet. I'm going to be dancing hopefully for the rest of my life. So I want to encourage you today to think about that. Think about, the time to weep and the time to laugh. Excuse me, and the time to mourn and the time to dance. And if you're not in your season of dancing yet, hold strong because it's coming. And so with that, please let us know how you're doing in the comments section, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.